So there's a new report out there regarding what's going on with the military. I want to go with you and let's jump right in. So it says military leaders voice concern over Hegseth's new Pentagon strategy. And if you've been following the story, you'll know Hegseth and Trump, they've called this meeting, calling back all the generals and admirals to meet in Virginia. That's going to be tomorrow, and it looks like people on the inside are already, expressing concern. It says military leaders have raised serious concerns about the Trump administration's forthcoming defense strategy, exposing a divide between the Pentagon's political and uniformed leadership as Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth summons top brass to a highly unusual summit in Virginia on Tuesday. And that's coming from 8 people, current and former. It says here the critiques from multiple top officers. So who's saying this? General Dean Cain, chairman of the Joint Chief of Staffs, come as Hegseth reorders U.S. military priorities, centering the Pentagon on perceived threats to the homeland, right? So want to use military against American people. Narrowing U.S. competition with China, right? So Trump, and I thought a report recently, I think they want to build more missile defense or something like that. Trump's always about the Golden Dome stuff, but I think it's also kind of all geared towards China. But then we also saw a report too that President Xi in China is going to try to pressure Trump to back off of Taiwan support. So there's a lot going on. And then you have the downplaying America's role in Europe and Africa, which we've heard that also, right? So Trump often attacks NATO. We know they want to close down a lot of the State Department, embassies, etc. in Africa. We've heard this stuff. And I mean, this is sort of why we're going through all this. And then they got that meeting tomorrow. President Donald Trump will attend the abrupt gathering, right? So we just heard about that yesterday, of generals and admirals at the Marine Corps base Quantico, where Hegseth is expected to deliver remarks on a military standards and warrior ethos. That's what Hegseth keeps talking about. If you don't know Hegseth, he's like the drunk guy, basically, in the Trump administration. Or we'll say one of many drunk guys there. Even as uniform leaders fear mass firings or drastic organization of the combatant command structure and the military hierarchy. And we're not sure exactly what they're going to do. So we've heard they're going to do some sort of PR thing. Hegseth was going to give a speech, and then I think Trump is going to come in. And the fear right now is are they going to try to fire as many people as possible, purge the military, and that's going to put essentially people in the Defense Department, right, in a tough spot because they're signed up to serve the American people in the Constitution, and Trump and Hegseth just wanted them to sign up to do loyalty to Trump. So I think you're going to have a real conflict here, in my opinion, as we go through this. The debate over national defense strategy, the Pentagon's primary guide for how it prioritizes resources and positions, U.S. forces around the world, is the latest challenge for top military officials navigating the Trump administration's unorthodox approach to the armed forces. So they don't do things like everyone else. For Trump people, maybe that's a positive, but I mean, I'll just say this: you're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with a lot of taxpayer dollars, and then also Trump is mostly interested in putting money in his pocket, right, or his friend's pocket. So there's a lot of money involved with this stuff. I think you guys know this with defense contracting, and I know Elon Musk. He wants to get a lot of this defense contracting money, be it with his AI and satellites and such. And you never know what else Musk is going to try to sell to the government. This isn't mentioned here, but I'm just telling you, just keep it all in perspective. People familiar with the editing process who, like others, spoke on the condition of anonymity, described sensitive deliberations. Okay, so they're still kind of to figure out what's going on. Described a growing sense of frustration with a plan they consider myopic, okay, and potentially irrelevant given the president's highly personal and sometimes contradictory approach to foreign policy. Yeah, so I guess they're drafting the speech and figuring out what they're going to say, and a lot of it doesn't make sense, basically. They're putting formal terms, but long story short, how do you deal with Trump who doesn't make sense and changes his mind often? Pentagon spokesperson Sean Parnell declined to comment on the substance of the classified document or whether concerns had been raised in the editing process. Okay, so they're saying no comment. Quote, Secretary Hegseth has tasked the development of a national defense strategy that is laser focused on advancing President Trump's common sense America first, peace through things agenda. This process is still ongoing. And I told you guys, this is all about government contracts, I promise you. They want to fire as many people as they can. They want to replace people with AI. They want loyal people, and they also want to give government contracts to their buddies. And Trump also wants to sic the American military on blue cities and states, essentially, right? And in my opinion, they're going to try to do some sort of martial law thing. I mean, that's just what this is going to look like, because we do also know Trump's like wants to fire as many federal workers as possible. So this meeting tomorrow they're going to have is actually really important. I'm very curious what they're going to do, and that's why people are literally speaking to the press. And then remember too, Haig said recently they wanted the press to sign basically loyalty pledges to say, hey, you can't write stories about the military unless we approve it. So they're going to try to cover up as much as they can. Long story short. It also says Trump political appointees within the Pentagon's policy office include some officials who have previously criticized longstanding American commitments to Europe and the Middle East. Drafted the strategy now in its final edits. Interesting. So if I had to guess, because I've been following this stuff, I would say probably the Trump people are going to demand that NATO or countries in Asia or whatever buy more American weapons. I promise you that's a big part of it. They're trying to, basically, Hegseth goes around and just tries to sell arms to other countries, is what it is. Whether or not they'll, say stuff like that we need to go after the enemy in the USA opposed to, outside the USA. I mean, we'll see. That part's, I mean, we'll see how the saying, there's different other considerations. So one's going to be government contracts, two is who is Trump going to designate as being the primary threat. And from Trump's point of view, maybe he's like, hey, we have to get those purple-haired nose ring people in Portland. And they really were talking about purple hair and nose rings. You'll see my last video. It's crazy. The draft plan has been shared widely with military leaders from the global combatant commands to the Joint Chief of Staff. So people have seen this, it says. Some of whom questioned what its priorities would mean for a force designed to respond to cities around the globe. According to 3 people from Military Matter, okay? Dissent, so people are disagreeing. Dissent during the drafting process is normal, but the number of officials concerned about the document and the depth of the criticism is unusual, several people have said. And this is something I want to mention. We have a lot of people in our community that work for the government, we're in the military, or are in the military still. And I'll just say this, there's a lot of people out there that are apolitical, right? It's not really about left or right. It's about just serving the people, serving the Constitution. It's about, hey, if you're picking who's going to get promoted, pick the people who are of good character, moral standing, care about the men and women in uniform. I get upset here because like the way Trump does stuff, it's so obvious, it's all corrupt. I mean, it should be obvious to anyone. And I think what's so sick about the Trump people is like, they got that whole propaganda news arm. It's not just Fox, it's any of those right-wing medias or the right-wing, social influencers who basically, I'll just be frank, guys, that they're dumb. And they put out dumb messages nonstop. It's things that are illogical, that are easily, identifiable as being false. And they promote this stupid culture like nonstop. And I'm just telling you that there are people out there that don't want to play these political games. And again, they're there to serve the people in the Constitution, and that's the people that Trump doesn't want, right? They don't want, Trump doesn't want the experienced people. They want the worst people possible. It's frustrating. And I think Hegseth, and there's a lot of people in the Trump administration, but Hegseth is a kind of pinnacle of that. Hegseth used to be a Fox News guy, and that's who Trump wants. It's all about running his TV show. And if Trump had his way, he'll have a UFC fight at the White House every year. They really are playing UFC fight. It's like that's what they complain about. The money stuff in DC, and yet Trump's spending money on military parades, UFC fighting. Now we're calling all the generals back. And because they have to do it on such short notice, the costs are enormous to do this. Plus, the whole thing is expensive. And it's just a big waste of money. And it doesn't make us safer, and it doesn't help your healthcare costs go down, or housing costs go down, things that people really care about. And it's frustrating because when I read this stuff, like saying there's more pushback in the Pentagon than normal, you get these kind of reports coming from high-level officials basically saying Trump's crazy. It's basically what it ends up being. They say it in more formal terms, but you can see in the language, because I follow this stuff a lot, and I haven't seen this kind of stuff before. And then again, there's a lot of people in the military or in our intelligence communities that know what Trump is doing is wrong. And the way we have it right now is like they got to come out and push back and do it in a way that doesn't divide the country and get us all fighting each other. This is the challenge here, right? Because Trump is trying to divide everyone, and we need more people in the USA to just want to hold the ship together and keep us all sane. It's deeply upsetting. I just want you guys to know if you're upset by this stuff, as I am too, and I know that you're not alone. And I want to keep going through this, so I do want to know what's going on. Kane shared his concerns with the top Pentagon leadership in recent weeks, according to two people familiar with the matter. Quote, "We gave," Haig said, "very frank feedback," one of the two people said. I don't know if Hegseth even understands the magnitude of the NDS, which is why I think Kane tried so hard. Yeah, they don't even trust Hegseth, I doubt it. The second person said Kane has tried to get NDS to remain focused on preparing the military to deter, if not necessarily defeat, China in conflict. Hegseth and his policy officials have signaled the Pentagon will withdraw some forces from Europe. So that's what they're talking about here, getting troops out of Europe and essentially giving more power to Putin, basically, and consolidate commands in what that unnerves some U.S. allies, particularly amid the Russia's war with Ukraine and its recent repeated incursions into NATO airspace. Yeah, and I've been seeing that too. If you guys haven't followed that, I think Russia's been sending a bunch of drones. I think Finland and Poland are the ones that have been scrambling. I've been, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I did see that there were NATO jets scrambled, and Russia's getting more aggressive. They keep launching attacks on Ukraine. I saw that one recently also. So that's probably what's under consideration right now, is how much forces they want to pull out from Europe, and then most likely, again, it's all about weapons sales also. For years, Pentagon strategy has been anchored in the idea that nations' best defense was in building and maintaining strong military alliances abroad. Critics of that approach within the administration have argued that it has mired the U.S. in expensive wars on foreign soil, instead of securing domestic U.S. interests. Trump's approach so far has largely been to prod allies to spend more on their own defense. See, I told you guys about money. At times, alienate Republican defense hawks in Congress, who are also urging higher defense spending at home. The thing about any of this stuff, there's always money for the military, right? There's never enough money for schools and never money for healthcare, but there's always money for the military. While Trump has undertaken bombing campaigns in Yemen and Iran, his main focus has been surging the military toward missions close to American soil. Yeah, and he's going to try to start with the war with Venezuela lately too. Under his command this year, the Pentagon has struck alleged drug traffickers. So we don't know if these are fishing boats, if they're drug mules. We don't know if they're tourists or whatever. I mean, seriously, we don't know, because they destroy the evidence. They disappear any witnesses, right? Basically kill people. Let's be frank with you guys. And the whole thing is concerning. What everything Trump is doing is concerning. And then they're putting troops on the border, which you can see here. Yeah, they sent National Guard and Marines. I think that was to LA. Over the weekend, Trump on social media ordered troops to Portland, saying he is allowing them to use full force, and they got ICE, etc. So what else is there? Much of the internal criticism of the new strategy regards the document's emphasis on threats to U.S. homeland, even as China continues a rapidly military buildup that uniformed leaders have warned is narrowing the U.S.'s edge in the Pacific. Now, regarding the China stuff, the last stuff that I saw, and it's real, I guess China's like building sort of artificial islands, that's a good way to say it, airships, stuff like that, to project more military power. I know China's also been pushing the border with Philippines. They have these weird incursions where they're not shooting each other, but they're like seriously like fighting with like shovels and knives kind of thing. Like literally shovels, and shovels. It's a weapon. It's not, again, they're not shooting, but they and the boats will clash. If you've ever seen these videos, you'll see this stuff. And China's they're just expanding their both hard power and soft power while the U.S. is retreating. It is what it is. I'm just telling you what's going on. I think in the long scheme of things, what Trump is doing is really damaging U.S. Relationships around the world. Even like, say, I live in Korea. There are strong alliances for years with, say, with not just Korea, but Korea and Japan with the USA. But then lately they've been looking to China to be more stable than the U.S., which is sad. You guys don't realize like how badly Trump is hurting relations in Asia. It's pathetic, because like why? Like what's the point? I mean, everything that Trump's doing, it seems like the winners are not USA. It's, you know, from Trump's point of view, Trump first, and then other countries are benefiting as US loses relationships, essentially. What else does it say here? There are still substantial sections of the document that do focus on China, but these are largely concentrated on the threat of an attack on Taiwan. And again, Xi's going to try to get Trump to not back Taiwan, essentially. Rather than global competition with the U.S. largest adversary, 5 people said. Colby has long warned that U.S. military is unprepared for a risk of a Chinese invasion and called for the Washington to shift attention and resources toward the problem. There's a concern, and that it's not just very well thought out, okay? The document's tone is far more partisan than past strategies, of course it is, saying the Biden administration caused an erosion of Americans' military in rhetoric similar to Haig's speeches. Okay, so they're going to blame Biden for everything. That's when in doubt, blame Biden. No, seriously, that's what it says. Haig, meanwhile, is leading an overhaul of armed forces, promising to cut the roughly 800 generals and admirals overseeing the U.S. military by 20%. Yeah. And then you also have this there. So the interim document also hinted at emergency strategy to use the military personnel in more assertive role at home and abroad. And then talking about sealing the borders, etc. So that's what's going on. We'll see exactly what this ends up being, but basically from what I gather from reading this and just talking out loud, I think this whole boils down to loyalty to Trump and then a document on what is the purpose of the military. And then remember, they changed the name, well, without Congress, so it's like a nickname, I guess you could call it that, but from Department of Defense to Department of War. And, you know, if I had to bet, Trump's going to try to use the military to seize more power. That's how I see this. And so we'll see who goes along with it, who doesn't, who gets fired and who doesn't. So that's my thoughts on this. I'd like to hear yours, and I'll catch you on the next video.